Today we are going to be visiting an area where the Ridgewood baseball grounds once stood. Now the baseball stadium no longer exists, however, that doesn't mean that we can't visit the site that was the third home of the current Los Angeles Dodgers organization. The Dodgers, then known as the Brooklyn Grays, played their Sunday games exclusively at Ridgewood Park between the years of 1887 to 1889 to avoid the Sabbath laws of the city of Brooklyn. While the history of the Dodgers organization also lists some games as being played at Ridgewood Park in 1886, those games were actually played at Growers Ridgewood Park, which, surprisingly, the grounds of which were located just a little more than a block away from where we currently are. So stay tuned and join me on our trip today as we pay homage to the Brooklyn Trolley Dodgers. The ballpark has a lot of history, ranging from a great story about the heavyweight boxing champion John L. Sullivan arriving to fight there, to the Negro League teams that occupied the site after the Dodgers had left. Plus, we will hear how the Dodgers prevented the New York Yankees organization from making this park their own Sunday home. Today I am in Bushwick in Brooklyn, in an area that was once known as Ridgewood in Queens back in the 1880s until the city borders were moved. Now the reason I'm here today is to visit the location of an old Brooklyn Dodgers ballpark, back when they were known as the Brooklyn Grays and the Brooklyn Bridegrooms. Now Ridgewood Park was the third home of the Brooklyn Dodgers organization between the years 1887 to 1889. They played 3 summers here, and I'm going to do a walk around the what would have been the stadium and then do a studio narration for that, but I just want to set the scene for you. So the ballpark was located right here, and the actual entrance was beyond the railway tracks. Well, the Long Island Railroad Montauk line stopped running years ago, like decades ago. However, we can still see where the railway tracks once were, because they're still sticking out of the ground, what's remaining of them. So we know that Ridgewood Park, the ballpark, was south of here. Now in 1886, when the ballpark was built, this area right here was a grandstand. And the grandstand was in left field, which means that the home plate back in 1886 would have been right at the end of this road here. Now, like I said, at the time, this area was Ridgewood in Queens. And the city line, which is important for a second story that I'm doing, the city line was down on the next block there, and that's going to make for a really interesting story. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you the story of the Brooklyn Dodgers here at Ridgewood Park in Ridgewood, Queens, and we're going to do that as a studio narration, and I'm going to try something a little different right as a police helicopter flies above. and see whether or not we can make this work. So stay tuned as we walk around what was once known as Ridgewood Park. There will be many articles and images included in this video, so if you need extra time to read or study something, then I would suggest using the pause button to do so. The Brooklyn Trolley Dodgers were founded in 1883 by Charles Byrne. Known simply as the Brooklyns, the team set up its stadium in the Park Slope neighborhood of Brooklyn and called it Washington Park. It was the local reporters that nicknamed the team the Grays, a nickname that was used through 1887, save for the year of 1884, when they were known as the Atlantics. During the summer of 1886, in order to avoid the blue laws of the city of Brooklyn on the Sabbath, the Brooklyn Grays played 14 Sunday games at Grauer's Ridgewood Park, along with one exhibition game. As you can see from this map, Grauer's Ridgewood Park, which is the top arrow, was located just north of where Wallace's Ridgewood Park was located. This was the second home of the Brooklyn Dodgers. And as I had to pass it in order to get to Wallace's Ridgewood Park, I also filmed the location of the second home of the Brooklyn Dodgers, which was located between Cypress and Seneca Avenues and George and Weirfield Streets. So let's stop at the second home of the Dodgers first, before we return here to the third home of the Brooklyn Dodgers. So right now, as I just mentioned in the intro, we're here to visit the second home of the Brooklyn Dodgers organization. Now, the Brooklyn Dodgers played here at Grauer's Ridgewood Park in the summer of 1886, where they played 13 or 14 games. The exact number I'm not 100% sure. Now, the baseball stadium, Grauer's Ridgewood Park, was only here for like 2 years. And this was before any pictures were taken of the park. And there's no map to actually distinguish exactly where it was. So what I had to do was to go back into newspaper archives to try and find out exactly where the park was. And this is only an approximation, but it's a pretty good educated guess. The ballpark was located between Grauer's Brewery. Now, if you see the big building just behind the light there, Grauer's Brewery was right opposite the street, closest to us. So if you see the white building with the little blue square on there, that would have been Grauer's Brewery. The ballpark was right behind the brewery, which would have put it here, and it was between the brewery and the Coliseum. And the Coliseum is right there where the well, it's not there anymore, but the Coliseum used to be. It's the second building down. So the second home of the Brooklyn Dodgers in the summer of 1886 took place right in this area here. Now, exactly where the boundaries are of the ballpark, I don't know, but because I got the widescreen on, obviously I'm going to pick up roughly where the ballpark was. The funny part is, that's a school right opposite now, and I wonder how many of the people who go to school there know that the Brooklyn Dodgers used to play in this area right here. Like, the grounds that they're on is probably the grounds where the baseball stadium was. Anyway, let's go back to the third home of the Brooklyn Dodgers, which is where the main story is today. The cost to play the Sunday games at Grauer's Ridgewood Park was very high, which cut into any profits that could be made by charging for Sunday admission. The other Ridgewood Park in the area, Wallace's, had already been playing host to amateur baseball clubs, and had even scheduled a world heavyweight boxing fight featuring John L. Sullivan. While the fight was called off as the pugilists prepared to duke it out, the attendance was still 5,000 men, certainly something to catch the attention of club owners. Beginning in 1887, the Brooklyn Grays began to play their Sunday games at Wallace's Ridgewood Park, and it would be the site of their third home for the next 3 seasons. In fact, the team was playing there when, in the summer of 1888, 6 of the Brooklyn players got married. For the remainder of their time at Ridgewood Park, they were nicknamed the Brooklyn Bridegrooms, a name that stuck for the next 10 years, either as the Bridegrooms or simply the Brooklyn Grooms. In the baseball history books, Wallace's Ridgewood Park is commonly known as Ridgewood Park 2, with Grower's Ridgewood Park being known as Ridgewood Park 1. The area that I am walking in today is now located in Bushwick in Brooklyn, between Wyckoff and Irving Avenues and between Halsey and Covert Streets. At the time that the ballpark was located here, though, the area was then located in Ridgewood, Queens, before the boundaries changed of the city, except for a corner of the stadium right where Halsey and Irving meet, which was located in Brooklyn. In my John L. Sullivan story, I tell the tale of how the fighters came to boxing Queens, but were prevented from doing so by the police. A patron then told the fighters that a corner of the stadium was actually located in Brooklyn, and the fighters then agreed to fight in that corner of the stadium. Unfortunately, a rat threatened to snitch on them, and they were prevented from fighting in Brooklyn as well. When the Dodgers left this stadium in 1890, they had played their Sunday games here as a major league team for the American Association. However, they were not the only Major League Baseball team to play here. In 1890, the newly formed Brooklyn Gladiators began playing in the American Association after the Brooklyn Bridegrooms had moved to the National League. The Gladiators only played 1 season as a Major League team. They were replaced in the league in 1891 by the Baltimore Orioles. However, they only played in Ridgewood Park until June of 1890 before moving on to the Polo Grounds. So that was the last Major League team to call Ridgewood Park home. That was not the end of baseball at this stadium, though. Not by a long shot. Semi-pro ball was played here until 1917, when a fire caused significant damage to the grandstand and bleachers, and continued until 1928, albeit on much smaller grounds after the fire. In the late 1890s, Ridgewood Park became one of the many venues that the pre-Negro League genuine Cuban Giants would use, along with several other teams made up of African-American players. This continued until 1904, when the New York Yankees, then known as the New York Highlanders, sought to have Ridgewood Park serve as their home grounds. The move was protested by the Brooklyn Dodgers organization, and a final ruling went in favor of the Dodgers, the basis of which was that it would be unfair to the territory of the Dodgers if a Manhattan-based club could use Ridgewood Park. In fact, this particular newspaper clipping was of special interest to me, mainly because it appeared in the New York World newspaper, from which the term World Series is derived, as in sponsored by the New York World newspaper. The Yankees did play in Ridgewood Park on numerous occasions in 1904, though only in exhibition games. In 1912, one of the last tenants of Ridgewood Park went to the club known as the Brooklyn Royal Giants, another pre-Negro League team consisting of African-American players. Though the park stopped being a Major League Baseball stadium in 1890, it still continued as a ballpark for another 38 years. For the last 31 years of its existence, the park was reduced dramatically in size and was used primarily as a soccer stadium. It had even been renamed by that point to Grand Stadium as well. Soccer had been played on these grounds dating all the way back to the 1880s, and the grounds were even used back then to please the local Irish immigrant community, with games of hurling and Gaelic football also taking place here. The last time that the Brooklyn Dodgers played at this park was in 1916, when they played 2 exhibition games against the local Bushwick's team. At the time, the Dodgers were then known as the Super Bars. Playing on the field at Wallace's Ridgewood Park for those games were none other than 3 future Hall of Famers, the New York legend Casey Stengel, as well as Zach Wheat and Rube Marquardt. Go ahead and pause the video if you want to read the box score. One final thing that I want to address with the Dodgers playing at Ridgewood Park is the Wikipedia page for this stadium. On Wikipedia, they try to imply that the Brooklyn Dodgers returned to Ridgewood Park in 1947 to play some spring training games here, and they refer to an article in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle to justify this claim. By this time in 1947, as I had mentioned a little while ago, this stadium was then known as Grand Stadium, which had been drastically reduced in size and was being used as a soccer stadium. In 1947, the Brooklyn Dodgers spent spring training in Havana, Cuba, and the Wikipedia page specifically refers to this newspaper article to make their claim. As you can see, the reporter is in Havana, Cuba, where the Brooklyn Dodgers would play their games at Grand Stadium. However, this is Grand Stadium in Havana, Cuba, not Ridgewood, Queens. Perhaps the confusion came when the article mentioned the following. Pascual had offered Mexican contracts to some 20 Dodgers in the hotel lobby of the Brooklyn headquarters. Perhaps it should have read Brooklyn's temporary headquarters while they are based in Havana, Cuba. There are literally thousands of articles from newspapers all over the USA covering the Dodgers stay during spring training in Havana in 1947. They played their games at Grand Stadium in Havana, which was known locally at the time as Gran Estadio de La Habana, the Great Stadium of Havana. It would have been difficult for them to play baseball in a soccer stadium. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed the trip today to discover the lost baseball stadiums of the Brooklyn Dodgers. And I hope that you learned something along the way. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and if you want to watch more, then be sure to subscribe as well. Bye for now, guys.